So, you cannot believe how long I've been meaning to film this video. I've had this list written out for probably 3 or 4 months and just kept getting super sidetracked with other things and have not managed to actually film it yet, but today is the day where I will be talking about my top 20 favorite characters of all time. This only covers book series, and so I have a lot of TV show and movie characters that would probably supersede actually some of these book characters. Prime example of that being Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender would definitely be in my top 5, but since this is book characters only, I cannot include him. So I'm going to go through my list and explain why some of these characters are really impactful to me or why they make my ranking. And at number 20, we have Gandalf the Grey. This is a little bit biased because I just finished rewatching the entire Lord of the Rings movies, and although I haven't read the books since I was a teenager, which has been quite a long time by now, I definitely should do a reread. So I think my view of any Lord of the Rings character on this list is a bit colored by my impression of the movies, but that's okay, we'll let it slide. Just some of Gandalf's quotes are absolutely amazing. He's pretty much like the Iroh of Lord of the Rings, and while I think you do run the risk when you have an old wise character of falling into some sort of trope, I think that it doesn't matter because Gandalf is kind of like the original fantasy version of the wise old man, and some of his lines are just absolute bangers that we should all aspire to live by, so he will stay solidly at my number 20. At number 19, I have Halt from Ranger's Apprentice. This is a series that harkens back to my childhood. I was absolutely obsessed with Ranger's Apprentice when I was a kid, and I thought that Halt as Will, the main character's mentor, was super well executed, an interesting, well-rounded character, and I just loved the Rangers in that book, the way that they fought and the way that they were kind of spies but also fighters and did a little bit of everything, and I thought that Halt perfectly exemplified that, and I just absolutely love training sequences in books, and so I will always love characters that are either giving or receiving training, and that is why Halt makes it to number 19 on my list. At number 18, we have a character who's not human, and that is Blue Star slash Paw slash Fur from the Warriors books, and if you've watched any videos on my channel, particularly the me rereading the entire Warriors series as an adult, you will know that especially that first arc of Warriors, I will rank as a genuinely good series. Like, it has well-rounded characters, an amazing, engaging plot, emotional stakes, and I do not necessarily think the same for the rest of the series. While they're still entertaining, that first arc is truly just the pinnacle, and Blue Star's Special Edition, which is the book entirely about her life from the second that she's born to pretty much the time that she dies, I think is an amazing character study, and she's really interesting and has a lot of depth and is definitely an example of a strong female leader who also had to sacrifice a lot of her own wants and needs in order to be a leader, which I think is a good reflection of women in leadership positions in our real world and how they're treated by the people under them. So I just think she's amazing, and her kind of mental decline was really well executed in the main arc as well. Then at number 17, we have a book series that I was also kind of obsessed with as a kid, and this also kind of bleeds into a TV show as well, and that is Laura Ingalls Wilder. I don't know what it was about these books when I was a kid, but I just absolutely ate them up, and there's not necessarily anything super specific about Laura in particular, but just the fact that you see her entire life through her eyes. I think it's always more impactful when you know the character from the time that they're 5 to the time that they're like a late adult. You just get to know them so much more, and so that's why I think Laura makes the list. And I even wrote a Laura Ingalls Wilder fanfiction at one point where Laura was transported to the modern day, and the girl who was the main character in my story had to introduce Laura Ingalls into modern life. So I guess I liked it enough to go into fanfiction territory, but we're not going to revisit that. At number 16, we have Matthew de Clermont from the Discovery of Witches series, and the reason why I have Matthew on this list is because while I tend to not love male characters who are particularly aggressive or possessive. I think that Matthew is a well-executed version of this male trope, and sometimes he strays a little bit too far into the possessiveness for my taste. However, he is a vampire, so I can forgive it from a species level difference. But I just think he has a lot of depth, and his history is very interesting, and he is certainly a more interesting main character in that series, I think, than Diana is, and so that is why he made this list and she didn't, just because I think there's more to learn about him, which makes sense because he's like, you know, ancient and she's not, so that also is part of the reason. Then at number 15, we have another Lord of the Rings character, and that is Legolas. And like I said with Gandalf, this is perhaps a little bit colored by my recent rewatch of the movies, and I was just in love with Legolas as a child, as any young person would be with either Legolas or Aragorn or Arwen or any of the attractive fantasy characters in the movies and books. And honestly, since I haven't reread the books in so long, I don't actually remember how much Legolas is in the book, and so again, a little bit of a biased placement based off of the movies. I will allow myself those two contradictions to my rule. He's just kind of the pinnacle of like elves doing absolute badass shit, and also I played World of Warcraft, and the amount of night elf hunters that I had during my Legolas era is actually insane, so that's why he made the list. Then at number 14, we have Spensa from Brandon Sanderson's Skyward series. The first Skyward book is absolutely fantastic, and I still like the rest of the series too, but I think nothing will compare to the first book in that series. And I just love that Spensa is super strong-willed and courageous and interesting, well-rounded, and I think he did a great job of writing a teenage girl character for the fact that he has never been a teenage girl. She feels authentic and realistic. Her relationships with her friends, her struggles with emotion and war all feel really authentic, and I love that even though she struggles, she always pushes through all of those struggles, and she's a badass fighter pilot, so how could you not love her? At number 13, we have another Brandon Sanderson character, and that is Vin from the Mistborn series. I do think that because this is one of his earlier series, Vin is not a perfect female character. He definitely gets better at writing female characters as time goes on, but she's still pretty damn good. And it's been a long time since I reread the Mistborn series, but I just remember sobbing at the end of the series. If you've read it, you'll know exactly what I mean. But I thought Vin was the perfect character to carry this series. Obviously, she falls into the kind of like street urchin to power trope, which when done well is just a fantastic trope, and I can see why authors keep returning to it, because who doesn't want to dream of being pulled off the street and discovering that you have this amazing power and basically saving the entire world from destruction? So I think Vin carries that very well on her shoulders. She's complex and emotional, but still does what needs to be done, and that is why I love her. At number 12, we have Ginny Weasley from the Harry Potter series. Not the movies, because they absolutely butchered Ginny Weasley's character in the movies, but in the books, she is awesome, and I wish that she got more page time. I just think she's the most interesting female character in that entire series, even more so than Hermione Granger, and I just love when she starts getting really good at magic and starts cursing people all the time. So she's always been my favorite character in that series. And then at number 11, we have Katza from the Graceling series. I was obsessed with the Graceling book when I was a kid, and Katza and Poe when I do another series on my top 20 couples in book. Katza and Poe will definitely make that list. I think I also wrote a Katza and Poe fanfiction at some point back in the day. Also will not be revisited. And I loved how broken and battered Katza was by life, but literally the most determined character ever. She will just keep going no matter what life throws at her, which then makes sense when you find out that her gift, her magic blessing, is basically survival, and she embodies that as a character. Like, she is a survivor. No matter what happens to her, she is going to pick herself up and keep going, and that I feel like was very inspiring as a teenager. At number 10, I have Pip from the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. When I was reading the first book in that series, I was like, wow, I have never met a character that is so much like me in real life. Like, the way that Pip is so dedicated to school and like being the good girl, pretty much. I related to that a lot. Did not relate to the end of the series as much when she murders someone, but I I still think she's an amazing character, and she was the perfect person to kind of carry this mystery. We care about her, we want her to succeed. She goes through a very interesting and entertaining transformation throughout the series, from the good girl to a good girl dealing with murder, and I think it was just, I saw myself reflected very well in Pip, and I enjoyed that entire series and binged the crap out of it. Then at number 9, we have Nona Gray from the Red Sister series by Mark Lawrence, and Nona Gray is basically an orphan who becomes a nun at this convent of murderous nuns, and I also think Nona is a very good example of a female character written by a man, because her relationships and friendships with the other young women at the convent are very realistic, especially since she's someone who went through a lot of trauma as a kid. You know, she's not a perfect friend. She's going to struggle with, you know, letting people in, but her friendship with some of the other women is amazing, and like I said, I love any sort of books that have training sequences, and so it's really interesting to get to see Nona grow as a person and in her powers, and also deal with all of the dark, shadowy stuff that is in her past and her present and her future, and I loved following along with her. So then at number 8, I can't keep track, I have Rix from the Obsidian Tower series by Melissa Caruso. I've always described this series as pretty much just D&D in a book series, and that's exactly who Rix is. She feels like a D&D character, and she's just so entertaining. She starts the first book with this curse, basically, where anyone she touches dies, and so she is a little bit emotionally stunted because of the fact that she can't have any real human connections with anyone, but there's good found family in this book as she grows into her power and finds friends who don't care that she might accidentally kill them when she touches them, and her romance in that book is also very good, and she just is such an adventurer and also so smart. My biggest pet peeve in a lot of books is when characters are supposed to be smart, but then they just make the stupidest decisions throughout the entire book, and Rix is like the antithesis to this. She actually makes smart decisions, and it's so refreshing to read when the character is not just doing dumb stuff for like the entire novel and then getting rescued somehow by some magical occurrence, and so I really enjoyed that. At number 7, we have Vis Telemus from The Will of the Many, which was one of my favorite reads of this entire year. There are not many men on this list. There are 5 total men, and Vis ranks the highest of the men on this list. I just think he's a very interesting character, and part of the reason is because he subverts the typical, oh, my family died, I'm out for revenge, time to join with the rebellion. He kind of subverts that trope by all wanting revenge still, but being willing to like be patient and work within the system, and anytime the rebellion kind of tries to get him on their side, he's just like, nah, you guys are literally blowing people up, I don't agree with your method, I'm gonna do this my way. And he's very smart without being too like Gary Stu, so I really enjoy his character, and I'm so excited for the rest of the series to see where it goes. At number 6, we have another Brandon Sanderson character, and that is Navani from the Stormlight Archives. My favorite scenes in the 4th book of the Stormlight Archives, The Rhythm of War, was when Navani was working with one of the evil people, and they were just talking about like science and how to develop, how to experiment, and coming up with all these crazy solutions. She's just another example of a character who is very smart and actually uses that intelligence to make intelligent decisions and not to make dumb decisions, and it was very interesting to see her working kind of alongside the enemy and building a relationship with the enemy in that book, while also maintaining her commitment to building a better world and uncovering the magic system, so I love her. Then at number 5, getting into the top 5, we have our first Tamara Pierce character, and that is Daine. It was really, really hard for me to rank the Tamara Pierce characters, and while I love Daine's story a lot, I think compared to the other leads of Tamara Pierce's book, she's not my favorite, partly because she annoys me sometimes, and by sometimes I mean like 5% of the story, which is significantly less than characters in many other books, but just when I'm comparing her to the other Tamara Pierce leads, there's just something about her that doesn't quite rank in the top 3, but Daine is absolutely amazing. Her compassion for animals and nature, and her kind of smart, dry sense of humor, and her no-nonsense approach to life. You know, she doesn't really let things bother her too much. She just shrugs her shoulders and keeps going, and I loved reading about her as a kid and as an adult. At number 4, I have my second A Discovery of Witches character, and that is Isabeau de Clermont. I think Isabeau is the perfect example of watching a character overcome prejudices in a book while also still being super entertaining and lighthearted. She has this heavy weight on her shoulders all the time from the loss of her mate, and she doesn't let that completely like sour her whole view on life, and it's really interesting to watch her development throughout the series. And if you've read the series, in the 3rd book, when my favorite chapter I think of the whole series is when Isabeau is prisoner from Gabert, another vampire, and she basically teaches him how to use the internet and lets him go on all these like illegal websites and basically just like get all these viruses because she introduced him to the internet. And that whole chapter is just a hoot and the perfect example of her character just weathering literally any storm in like a very lighthearted way. So I love her. At number 3, we have another character from the Graceling Realm series, and that is Bitter Blue. I was obsessed with Bitter Blue's book when it first came out. Another example of a very smart, intelligent character, and I was obsessed with the fact that she used to write things in code, and to the point where I literally learned the code that was taught in the book and was writing ciphers like all over the board at school, which was probably a little embarrassing, but you know what, we're over it now. And I also love Bitter Blue's relationship with Katza, who is the other Graceling character that I have on this list. And I saw a lot of myself in Bitter Blue the same way that I saw a lot of myself in Pip, the very academic-minded, kind of driven to the point where you kind of forget the blinders on and forget about what's happening around you. I related to that a lot, especially in the academic setting. At number 2, we have our second Tamara Pierce character, and this was such a hard decision, but I have put Kelladry of Mindolin at number 2, and Kel is nothing at all like me. I am way too emotional to relate to Kel at all, but Kel is the type of person that I perhaps aspire to be, and that is just completely grounded, so unruffled. She has her Yamini Isles training where she basically, anytime something starts to overwhelm her emotionally, she becomes stone, and truly the most unbothered character on this entire list. She's brave, she's resilient, she's a good leader of her friends, and the only reason why she's not number 1 is because I think there is one character that I just feel impacted the way that I view the world and shaped my life so much more, and that is also Tamara Pierce character, and that is Alana the Lioness. When I read these 3 series, the Daine, Alana, and Kel series as a teen, I actually read the Daine series first, which is technically the 2nd series, so I was introduced to Alana already as an adult through the Daine series, and then I went and read her series, which starts when she's 11. And even though I'm also not really like Alana, I do have a temper, but it's not quite as fiery as hers is. She is just the premier example of a female knight overcoming barriers and being super badass while she does it. I just love when she becomes super skilled with both the sword and with the magic, and she's just like the pinnacle of a fantasy book heroine to me. I literally could not ask for anything more, and anyone that tries to kind of recreate that character somehow just does not succeed because it becomes way too much of a caricature. But she's so well-rounded. I love how she moves through multiple romantic relationships in life and doesn't settle. She knows what she wants. She's confident. She might be a little bit brash, but that's kind of one of the things holding her back that has a good impact on the plot is her brashness, whereas I feel like Kel doesn't have quite as many weaknesses that feed into the plot, and so that is why I ranked Alana the Lioness number 1. And that is it. That is my top 20 favorite book characters of all time. Let me know what you thought, and I will have my top 20 book couples of all time sometime soon, and it will probably share a lot of the same names on this list, just matching them with their romantic relationship, but there will be some other ones too. So thanks for watching. Bye.